praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, Elohim of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I want to say peace to each and every one of you in the name of His Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who we know as Jesus the Christ. So it's a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to bring a message contained in this word, and I never count it as a light thing to do so. In today's message, I want to deal with a common misconception, and that misconception is regarding the rapture. The rapture doctrine is a common doctrine, although it is quite recent. It purports that during Great Tribulation, the saints won't have to suffer because prior to Great Tribulation, they will be raptured off into heaven. Now, the Bible clearly tells us that, as Christ said, "Where I go, you cannot come." There's no evidence that anybody's gone to heaven, and that is not certainly what will happen prior to Great Tribulation. And you have various versions of this doctrine, popularized by John Nelson Darby, and you find it in the Schofield Bible. But the reality is that that's just simply not the case. The Bible tells us something exactly different. So what I want to do right now is I want to go to the text that is oftentimes used to purport this false doctrine of a rapture. Let's pick it up in 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter. And I think that the rapture doctrine is one of the most dangerous doctrines of all false doctrines. Because if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing during Great Tribulation, not only will you miss out on your potential deliverance, because there is a potential deliverance during Great Tribulation, but it's not the rapture. And secondly, you're more than likely to have your faith fail you when you realize that what you've built it upon is pudding and not a solid foundation. So this is 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter. Now this is where the writings of Paul, this particular passage, this is oftentimes the central and foundational text for the doctrine of the rapture. This is 1 Thessalonians 4, and I'm going to read this one verse. It says in verse 17, "Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, so shall we ever be with the Lord." Now, one thing we need to do, or you should do, when you're reading, you need to, first of all, understand context. Because people see you're going off into heaven with the Lord, and this is at the time of the Great Tribulation. So you need to know what's going on in. Sometimes you can determine context from previous verses within that chapter, and sometimes you can even go into previous chapters and read into it. But in this one, we want to just go up to about verse 13 to find out what Paul is talking about. So now, I'll read that verse again in 17, then we're going to go to verse 13. 17 again reads, "Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." Now, if I were to close the book and give some conjecture and make up some things, I can concoct the doctrine of a rapture. But that's not the context here, nor this isn't talking about a rapture. There is no rapture. Verse 13, "But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope." So right here, we have the context. What is the context? The context is what happens to the dead that have died in Christ. Okay? Those who have passed on, what will happen unto them. He's telling you, I don't want you to be ignorant concerning them which are asleep. Asleep is a euphemism for dead. A nice way of saying those who have died. "That ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope." So what is this hope? Verse 14. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. Okay, so now the hope is that just as Christ died and was resurrected, so those who have died in Christ would be resurrected. Verse 15. "For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep." So he also tells us what will happen to those who are alive when the Lord returns. The ones who are alive that have died, that are servants of the Most High, when Christ returns, they're not going to prevent those who have died in Christ from getting their reward. What does he tell us in verse 16? "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first." Okay, so now, when is this, when we read in verse 17, going to take place? Well, first off, this is at his coming. Okay, So now, I'm going to read this again. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Okay, so another thing we should understand is when is it, we're going to hold our finger here and come back. When is the coming of the Lord? People, in many Christians, particularly Protestant faiths, they will tell you that the Lord can come back at any time. That is not accurate. Matthew the 24th chapter. Because his disciples came unto him privately, and it says, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So he gave them all the signs. And then he talked about great tribulation. Verse 29, take heed. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give a light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So when is this coming of the Lord? After great tribulation. So he's not going to come, rapture you off into heaven. You can't read that anywhere in the Bible. He's going to come again, and this is all foolishness. Because the Bible speaks of a resurrection. You have a first resurrection, then you have a great white throne judgment 1,000 years later. When is the first resurrection? At his coming. That's when you have the first resurrection. Okay? And when is he coming? Immediately after the tribulation. So he's not coming before great tribulation. He's coming after great tribulation. And he's not coming to take anybody to heaven. He's going to reign from Jerusalem. And notice here, let's go back. Notice what he says so you can understand. 1 Thessalonians 4 and verse 17. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. It didn't say he was taking you to the third heaven that the Bible speaks of, where the Father and the Son dwell. He's taking you, or he's calling you forth from the grave, those who have died, and those who are alive, right after that, they're all going to meet the Lord in the air. That's at the time of the first resurrection. And then what is he going to do? Then you're going to come to this earth and take over this world. Let's go read in we'll come back here. Zechariah and 14. Zechariah chapter 14. What does he tell us? Zechariah 14 reads in verse, I'll pick it up at verse 3. Or it says, Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. Now why the Mount of Olives? Because that's where he ascended from, and he's coming back in like manner, Acts 1 tells us. Which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and notice what it says next, and all the saints with thee, because you met him in the air. So he's coming after great tribulation. Okay? The Bible doesn't tell us that the saints don't have to suffer during great tribulation. Quite the contrary. It tells us that there will be suffering. Let's go and read something that the prophet Daniel wrote. Daniel, the 7th chapter. Daniel 7, and he talks about what's going to be taking place during great tribulation. You know, Antiochus Epiphanes that is prophesied of in this text, he foreshadows the man of sin. Now this man of sin, this persecution that's going to take place just prior to the Lord establishing his kingdom on this earth, takes place prior to his coming. And it says in Daniel 7 and verse 25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Now, someone say, well, so what? How do you know that's not talking about somebody else? Well, we know it's not talking about somebody else because of the time frame that is given. It says, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Time is 1 year, times is 2, dividing of time is a half, 3.5 years. This is the time of great tribulation. He's going to be wearing out the saints during great tribulation. This is not a time where the saints are raptured. You see these foolish movies where the plane is flying and then it's about to crash because the pilot was a believer and he was raptured. That is falsehood, and that is setting you up for a huge failure. Revelation the 13th chapter. So when you don't see a rapture, because that's actually not in the Bible. When you don't see a rapture off to heaven, you know what's going to happen? Your faith more than likely is going to fail you. That's why I said this is a terrible doctrine. I remember speaking to someone years ago. I had an apprenticeship, and it was at a newspaper, and the woman that owned the newspaper, she was an older woman, and she said to me one day, she said, you know, I can't wait to the rapture so we could be raptured out of here. And I felt bad because I said, you know, I was young. You know, that's not gonna happen. You know, I felt bad not telling her that. I felt bad that she put her hope and stock in falsehood. Revelation the 13th chapter, verse 11. It says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live." And so now you're going to have this man make an image. And it said, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." So if you don't worship this beast, just like in the days of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those who failed to or did not worship the image that he set up, hey, he cast those 3 servants of the Most High into a fiery furnace. Now they survived it because they refused to worship, but the Lord could have very well allowed them to die. He just didn't in that case. But you're going to have people being martyred during Great Tribulation. He said, "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save," that means except he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So you're not gonna be able to buy or sell, or basically engage in commerce and buy the things that you need if you don't take this mark. Now, I wrote a book, "For Then Shall Be Great Tribulation," which talks about, it's on Amazon and other platforms. It talks about what this mark could be, and talks about who this man of sin is. But now, understand in chapter 14 what happens if you take this mark. Revelation 14 and verse 9. And this is important because if you're worried about a rapture and it never happens, your faith fails you, and then you're confronted with being beheaded if you don't take the mark. Many people are going to just do that. They're going to be beheaded. But if you take the mark of the beast, you are going to hell. This is Revelation 14 and verse 9. "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image," again, this is during the time of Great Tribulation, "and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture in the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and who receiveth the mark of his name." Notice what he says here. Here's the patience of the saints. "Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." So now, understand, you're going to have and again, you can look at other lessons. We've done so many lessons on Great Tribulation, on the man of sin. But understand that there's a time of Great Tribulation that starts when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place. Whoso readeth understand, let him understand. And this man, the 666, that's referring to a title, Vicarious Filidae, Vicar of Christ. That is a title of the Pope. Somebody out of the one of the popes out of the office of the papacy is coming. That is who this man of sin is, and he's going to have power directly from Satan. He's going to set up an image. He's going to have power to like it says, come to life, so to speak. And then by the mark of the beast, it could be you know, people speculate RFID chips, biometrics, e-tattoos, etc. Some form of a mark. And understand, if you take that mark, you're going to hell. Secondly, I talked about a deliverance. Your deliverance is not with the rapture. Revelation the 12th chapter. This is verse 12. Excuse me, chapter 12 and verse 1. And there appeared a great one in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now that is a picture of Israel, and Israel, that is the church. Okay? So notice what he says here. I'm going to skip down because it talks about Christ, but then it goes even beyond us. He says, and verse 6, and the woman fled with into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that she should feed her there I'm going to start from the top of 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. 1,260 days. Time and the dividing of times. It's 3.5 years. So the escape from great tribulation is not the rapture. There is no rapture. The escape from great tribulation, even though some saints are not going to make it, you keep reading, some are going to die. Okay, because it tells you in verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So it is the escape to the wilderness. Now some will say, I got to get a passport, I got to do all this. The Lord makes a deliverance. What you have to do is have faith and be prepared to move at that particular time. So with that, brothers and sisters, it is always my prayer that you will edify.